The luxury train station buzzed with the frantic energy of the morning commute, but my focus was entirely on the crisp, digital ticket on my phone screen. I, Elena, had worked for 6 years as a consultant, building my own firm, Apex Solutions, from the ground up. Today was the culmination of that effort, a high-stakes merger meeting in London. I had booked the royal suite weeks in advance, dressed in a simple charcoal sweater and dark trousers, with my worn leather laptop bag at my side. I looked more like a tired student than a CEO. That was exactly how I preferred it. I settled into my seat, opened my laptop, and began reviewing the final term sheets. The silence of the cabin was blissful, until a sharp, authoritative knock against my mahogany table shattered it. I looked up to see Marcus Thorne, my former boss, looming over me. Behind him, a woman draped in vintage fur, a client I recognized as a notorious socialite, looked at me with undisguised disdain. "Elena," Marcus sneered, his eyes scanning my outfit as if he were cataloging my failure. "I see you're still playing dress-up in clothes that clearly don't belong in this section. Move to the economy car. This cabin is reserved for someone of actual importance." "Hello, Marcus," I replied, my voice steady, betraying none of the irritation I felt. "This cabin is reserved for me. I have the confirmation right here." I gestured to the ticket on my screen, but Marcus didn't even look at it. He let out a condescending laugh that echoed through the nearly empty car. He had always thrived on the illusion of superiority, a habit that had cost him his best staff back in the day. He didn't know that 3 years ago. I hadn't just left his company, I had pivoted to buy the firm that now controlled these very train routes. He saw an intern, not an adversary, as he signaled to the train conductor. I wondered if he realized that the person he was trying to humiliate was the one holding the keys to his future. The conductor approached with a hesitant gait, his eyes darting between Marcus's expensive Italian suit and my modest attire. It was a classic performance, one Marcus had perfected years ago. He knew that people often confuse confidence and expensive tailoring with authority. He didn't need to be right. He just needed the people in charge to be intimidated. "Is there a problem, sir?" the conductor asked, his voice strained. Marcus didn't waste a second. "Yes, the problem is this woman. She's a former employee who clearly hacked the system or made a booking error. She's obstructing my client. Escort her out so we can enjoy the privacy we paid for." I didn't react with anger or a scene. I simply looked at the conductor, ensuring I held his gaze. "I haven't hacked anything. I am the passenger listed in the system for this seat, and I have a valid contract for the use of this cabin for the entire journey. Please, check the passenger manifest again, carefully," Marcus scoffed, crossing his arms. "Don't waste your time. Frank, she's a nobody. Just get her off the train." I watched as the conductor pulled out his tablet, his brow furrowed. He seemed caught in a tug of war between his training and the aggressive pressure from Marcus. He swiped through several screens, his expression shifting from annoyance to confusion, then to a sudden, pale realization. He looked at me, then at the name on the screen, his hand trembling slightly. I hadn't raised my voice, nor had I threatened him. I simply waited, knowing that the truth, when verified by the system, is a quiet but devastating force. I could see the sweat forming on his brow, and I knew the moment of reckoning was approaching much faster than Marcus expected. "Ma'am, I'm not sure what to say," the conductor stammered, his eyes darting toward the back of the train car where other passengers were starting to take interest. The power dynamic in the room was shifting, though Marcus remained blissfully unaware, still checking his watch and tapping his foot in irritation. "What is the issue?" Marcus barked, his face turning a shade of frustrated crimson. "It's a simple request. Remove her." I calmly reached into my bag and produced a printed document, an official notice of my corporate booking status with the railway provider. I placed it on the table, face up, where both men could see it. The issue, Marcus, is that you are attempting to force a legitimate customer off their property based on nothing more than your ego? Marcus looked at the document, his eyes widening as he recognized the seal at the bottom, the mark of the holding company that owned the line. This is some kind of forgery, he stuttered, his bravado slipping. I leaned back, crossing my legs. You can verify the authentication code with the station manager if you doubt it, but I suggest you step away, or you'll be the one being escorted off this train. The conductor stepped back, his posture changing from subservient to cautious. He looked at me with a new, fearful respect. Ms. Elena, I apologize. The system didn't flag this earlier. I need to consult with the operations center to verify the override request. I simply nodded. I wasn't going anywhere. I had learned a long time ago that in business, as in life, the person who stays calm while everyone else loses their mind is the one who holds the power. I watched as the conductor scurried away to make a call, leaving Marcus standing there, suddenly looking very small in his expensive suit. Marcus was clearly not used to being told no. He paced the narrow aisle, his phone pressed to his ear, likely barking orders at his own beleaguered assistant. The socialite client, sensing that the situation wasn't proceeding as smoothly as she'd been promised, tapped her heels impatiently against the floor, her expression souring. This is unacceptable, she muttered loudly enough for everyone to hear. Marcus, I thought you said this was taken care of. It is, Marcus hissed, his composure completely fractured. He turned to me, his voice dripping with condescension. You think you're so clever, don't you? You always were the type to hold a grudge, but you're still just a petty, spiteful little girl who can't let go of the past. I didn't blink. I returned to my laptop, typing a few lines. I'm not holding a grudge, Marcus. I'm simply holding a reservation. There is a distinct difference between the two. He stepped closer, his shadow falling over my keyboard. You have no idea who I'm meeting today. I have contacts in this industry who will ensure you never book a ticket on this line again. You're finished before you even start. I looked up at him, my expression blank. If your connections are as strong as your booking management, I think I'll be just fine. He let out a sharp, jagged laugh. We'll see about that. He signaled to the security guards waiting on the platform, his eyes burning with a desperate need to reclaim his dignity. He was doubling down, unaware that the more he pushed, the deeper he was digging his own grave. He was gambling everything on the assumption that I was still the same person I was 3 years ago. But the reality was about to hit him like a freight train. The security guards, 2 men in crisp uniforms, entered the cabin. They looked at the scene, the tense businessman, the impatient socialite, and me, calmly typing away on my laptop. One of the guards, an older man with a weary look in his eyes, cleared his throat. Sir, we've been asked to clear the area for an issue regarding seating rights, the guard said, his voice flat. He turned to me. Ma'am, the conductor has reported a conflict. I stood up, closing my laptop with a quiet click. I didn't make a scene. I didn't beg for my seat. I simply gathered my belongings with the fluid, practiced efficiency of someone who had already decided the outcome. I understand. I'll step off, I said, catching Marcus's eye. The triumph in his gaze was sickeningly bright. Finally! Marcus breathed, exhaling with relief. She finally learns her place. I walked past them, my head held high. As I stepped onto the platform, the cool morning air brushed against my skin. I didn't look back at the train. I pulled my phone from my pocket and walked to a quiet corner of the terminal. I had 5 minutes. The train was scheduled to depart in exactly 300 seconds, and I had a very important call to make, a call that would shift the entire trajectory of Marcus Thorne's life. As the platform began to clear, I caught sight of the socialite settling into my chair, already looking out the window as if she owned the world. Poor thing. She had no idea that her VIP seat had just become the hottest seat of trouble in the entire country. The air was thick with the scent of ozone and impending change. I dialed the number for Sarah, my partner and the co-founder of the holding company that owned the rail line. She picked up on the first ring, her voice crisp and professional. "Elena, you're boarding. Right. The merger documents need your signature by noon." "I'm at the station, Sarah, but I've been forcibly removed from my suite," I said, my voice as level as a laser. "Marcus Thorne is currently occupying it, and he's using rail security to keep me off the train." There was a moment of silence, a dangerous, heavy silence on the other end. Marcus Thorne, the guy who let our last project fail because of his ego. "The very same," I replied. "He told me I was nothing and obstructing his client. He's currently on the train, and he thinks he's won." Sarah's tone shifted into a sharp, decisive register. "He's on the 9:45 departure, isn't he, Elena? Stay right there. Don't move. I'm going to contact the board of directors and the central operations office. We're going to initiate a full audit of his corporate account privileges. This is a clear breach of our equal treatment clause. Make sure they see the platform footage," I added. "I want them to know exactly how he handles valued passengers." "Consider it done," she said. "The train will be held at the station, and I'm going to make sure Marcus learns the real cost of his entitlement." I hung up and tucked my phone away. I felt a strange sense of calm. For years, Marcus had operated under the assumption that he was the most important person in any room. It was time he found out that the world didn't actually revolve around him, and that the little intern he discarded had a much longer reach than he could have ever imagined. Inside the cabin, the atmosphere had transformed from smug victory to palpable unease. The train, which was supposed to be rolling out of the station, had come to a grinding halt. The conductor, looking pale and erratic, was pacing the aisle. Marcus glared at him. "Why are we still here? We're 5 minutes behind schedule. Tell the driver to move." I can't, sir," the conductor replied, his voice barely a whisper. "There's a direct order from the operations center. All corporate-sponsored departures associated with Thorne Enterprises have been placed on immediate hold, pending a secondary security review." Marcus stood up, his face losing its color. That's impossible. My company has a contract with this line." "Not anymore, sir." A voice boomed from the doorway. It was the station manager, accompanied by 2 stern-looking men in suits. They weren't security guards. They were legal representatives for the holding company. "Mr. Thorne, we have reviewed the incident on the platform. Your behavior violates our fundamental code of conduct. Your corporate account is being suspended, and you are being asked to deplane immediately." Marcus stood there, trembling, his hands balling into fists. He looked at the socialite, who was now filming him with her phone, her expression shifting from boredom to pure, calculated distance. She was already mentally distancing herself from the disaster. "You can't do this," Marcus roared. "I have a meeting. I have a reputation." "You had a reputation, Mr. Thorne," the lead representative said, holding out a digital tablet for him to sign. "Now, you have a liability. Please, gather your belongings." The rest of the passengers were watching, their screens lit up, documenting every second of the downfall. It was the end of an era for Marcus, and he didn't even see it coming. The silence in the first-class car was heavy, broken only by the hum of the air conditioning. Marcus looked like a man who had suddenly woken up in a nightmare. He stared at the termination document, his fingers hovering over the screen. "This is a mistake," he muttered, though his voice lacked any real conviction. "I'll have my lawyers reach out to your board. Your lawyers might want to check the fine print of your contract first," the representative replied, his voice cool. Any harassment of a stakeholder or a ticketed passenger constitutes immediate termination of all corporate agreements. Your account has been flagged for a full forensic audit. Marcus looked out the window, his eyes scanning the platform. He saw me standing there, leaning against a pillar, my expression unreadable. For the first time, he truly understood. The person he had discarded, the person he had called an intern, was the owner of the board he was trying to threaten. "Elena," he shouted, stumbling toward the door. "Tell them this is ridiculous. You know how this works." I didn't move. I didn't even flinch. I just looked at him, feeling absolutely nothing, no anger, no triumph, just the cold, hard weight of reality. "I know exactly how this works, Marcus," I replied, my voice echoing slightly in the quiet station. "That's why I'm holding the ticket, and you're being escorted off the train." He looked back at the representatives, realizing there was nowhere left to run. The socialite had already gathered her bags and was demanding to be moved to a different car, leaving Marcus completely alone. The fall from grace wasn't a slow slide. It was a sudden, absolute drop into the dark. And it was all based on the simple truth that he had never bothered to look beyond his own reflection. The station manager stood by the open door of the train, his eyes inviting. "Ms. Elena, the suite has been vacated and cleaned. We apologize for the disruption. You are free to board." I nodded, my stride steady as I walked back onto the train. The air inside felt cleaner now that the toxicity of Marcus's presence had been removed. As I settled into my seat, I saw the remnants of his arrogance, a discarded magazine, a forgotten pen, and the lingering stale scent of his expensive cologne. I pulled out my laptop, but before I could get back to work, the conductor approached, looking as though he'd seen a ghost. "Ms. Elena, I am so sorry. I didn't know." "It's all right," I said, keeping my tone professional but firm. "I'm sure you'll be more careful with the passenger list in the future." He bowed his head, clearly relieved that I wasn't going to report him as well. "Of course, ma'am. We're departing immediately." As the train finally began to glide forward, gathering speed as it pulled away from the station, I felt a wave of relief. The merger was still on, my company was secure, and Marcus was back on the platform, likely watching the train disappear into the distance, wondering where it all went wrong. I didn't feel like a hero. I felt like a business owner who had protected her investment. I looked out the window at the blurred landscape. My phone chimed with a message from Sarah: "Account access revoked. Thorn Enterprises is officially in the red." I smiled, a small, quiet gesture that no one saw. I didn't need to win the argument. I just needed to survive the arrogance of someone who thought they were bigger than the rules. By the time the train reached London, the news of the Thorn Enterprises collapse was already breaking on business news channels. The clip of the incident, the confrontation, the arrogance, and the swift, silent justice that followed had gone viral. It was the perfect case study for the risks of unchecked ego in the corporate world. I stepped off the train in London, my canvas bag slung over my shoulder. The city was bustling, indifferent to the small drama that had just concluded in a train cabin hundreds of miles away. I walked toward the boardroom where my partners were waiting, my mind focused entirely on the future. Marcus, I knew, would spend the next few months struggling with lawsuits and public humiliation. He would have time to reflect on why he lost his company. But I suspected he would never truly understand it. He would blame the system. He would blame me. He would blame the conductor. He would blame everyone except the man who chose to treat a nobody like a disposable object. I arrived at the meeting room, pushing open the heavy glass doors. My team looked up, their expressions a mix of curiosity and respect. "Everything go all right?" one of them asked. "Just a minor delay," I replied, sitting down at the head of the table. "Everything is exactly where it needs to be." I opened my laptop, ready to finalize the deal, I had learned a long time ago that the world doesn't reward the loudest voice in the room. It rewards the person who knows their worth, stays silent when necessary, and prepares for the moment when truth has to do the talking. I was finally where I belonged, and for the first time in a long time, the path forward was completely, beautifully clear. I wondered if Marcus was finally learning his lesson, or if he was still waiting for someone to blame for the fire he started himself.